Welcome everyone to a meetup session from Data Roots. So this one will be about data governance, why and what. The main purpose here is not really to say like what you should do or should not be doing. What I will try to do is really give a good explanation of why basically you should do data governance. What are the cues that you should look for in order to consider data governance, and we look a bit at some use case that hopefully people can relate to. So maybe a bit, next slide. On the setup, so we've taken an example company here, the candy shop company, CSC in short. As you can see bottom right, that's the picture of our CEO. He really loves candy, so there you go, the joke. What does the candy shop company do? So they produce event-specific types of candies. They have online shopping. They also deliver at home. They do B2C, but also B2B. And they offer shipping for only 50 cents. Thanks. So like using this setup, like if we look a bit more on the inside, basically like they have a lot of different data sources. They have different data platforms for different teams. And at let's say the end of the stream, there is business. The idea is that basically like business consumes the data as a bit in every organization. And as you can see, like, so in the sources, we have sales from ACP, internet traffic from their website, on tracking, visiting number, purchases, all these kind of stuff. We have production costs from the production facility. We also have resources both from people but products. So that's the source of data we're dealing with. And in terms of teams, like there is the finance team. They have their own data platform, their own system. They get data of the sources, but also reports from sales and other departments. We have the sales team. They also have their own platform. They have their data analysis, their team that can create basic insights and reports. And then there is a dedicated data analytics team, which is more on the top here. And they take care of like insights, but also AI, for example, like so they can build machine learning models. And the idea there is that like they should provide insights to the business. And as we see, like the main consumer here is business in the broad sense of the term. So that's kind of the setup we have. And we'll go a bit through basically what can go wrong and what can you look for to be able to fix it. Tell me, but you need to change the slide. Right. Problem one, let's assume that business says, okay, guys, like what is the impact of this last marketing campaign we made? So they came up with a really good marketing campaign. I mean, they believe it was a really good marketing campaign, but they want to know like what is the impact of this. So the CEO needs to report on numbers on the latest marketing campaign. The CEO wants to know what is the exact impact, but the business doesn't really know where to reach out. So they go and they basically ask some guys. They ask the data team, and the data team says, well, what marketing campaign? It's not really our thing. And then the data team says, you know what, you should maybe ask the sales guys because well, marketing goes to sales. And sales says, well, yeah, this one we didn't really do it. It's more about finance, right? So finance says, yeah, it's good, but we don't have the latest sales report because that's actually back to sales. So as you can see here, like there is a big problem around ownership. Nobody really knows who to contact for what, and everybody is kind of putting it on the next guy. So the issue here is that with everyone building and using data, the organization basically quickly ends up with numbers that don't match with different departments. So for example, in this case, like different teams are basically not having the same figures at the end, and that's really impactful on business because there is no way to know like, how good this marketing campaign go. Second problem. So the data team says, okay, you know what, like we're the guys, we'll just build a report, that's fine. But the problem is they have no idea where to search for. So they don't have a good view on the source data. They don't know who they can contact. The data team is like there are different data sources and they're completely confused on where is the data coming from, but also where is it flowing to. Like, do they have to take data from SAP? Do they also need to include internet traffic, for example? And they also are speaking with other teams. So finance and sales, basically to be able to say, like, do we have everything we need? Thanks for closing the window. So if you look at this, like the issue here is basically that they don't have a good view on where the source data is coming from. They don't really know, again, who to contact. So there is a big issue there on traceability, basically. Another problem that could happen. We only have 4, and then afterwards we'll talk about how to solve them, which hopefully will be interesting as well. So here, like the data team says, okay, like, you know what, we figured a bit this out. Like, we've talked with different people. We're going to put a report out there that business can use to answer this question. So they actually built something. They delivered the report, but the content of the report is actually wrong. And there are 2 sides to this. One of them, I mean, if they know it's wrong, it's already good. Sometimes they don't even know it's wrong. So they're basically feeding bad insights to the business, which might actually take wrong decisions based on it. So the problem here is basically that the data team, they talk with finance, they talk with sales, they also looked into the SAP source, for example, and they said, you know what, like, we believe that marketing campaigns should be expressed like this, and this is the impact, and they try to match the sources, but they are not exactly sure what is the terminology. Sales speaks about different ways, like the marketing speaks about the marketing campaign in different ways than finance, than the data team, than business. So that's something that can happen as well. Next up, problem number 4, and that's the last one we will mention here. Now that the report has been built, the issue is, like, they build, for example, a new marketing campaign, or they want to track it over time, and because nobody really has ownership about it. Like, the data team said, yeah, you know what, we did this once just because you really required it, but reproducing it is going to be really difficult. So basically, it's not maintained. The data in there, we don't really know where it came from. Like, it's just somebody that just did it a bit on the side. And the issue here is like, reports and data are not maintained, so insights are not really usable after just a one-time exercise. If I move to the recap. So what went wrong? And that's a really short recap. So there is no ownership basically on the data. The business doesn't know who to contact. Like, it's just a team, like the data team, that took this over, but it's not clear who it should have been. Sorry. The centralized data team doesn't know if the data is of quality and is updated. They also don't really care because they just wanted to make it work for business. They built a solution, but they're not sure, like, what was built before. They're not sure, like, there is no continuity, there is no maintenance over it. They deliver the results, but because of the different definitions that could happen, like the fact that they try to match stuff together, it can be that they just gave the wrong information to business. And after a year or some period of time, like, the data that's in there is completely outdated. Nobody knows even how this came to be done. So taking all of these issues into account, there is a bunch of consequences that can happen, very obvious ones. There is no ownership defined. The sensitive data might be unknowingly shared with third parties. So, like, because nobody knows where the data is and what's inside these reports, maybe somebody from business shared it, and actually it contains very sensitive information. Data does not represent reality, so that's kind of the data quality problem that we've seen. Like, they might not even know about it. Different teams might deliver different reports, which leads to basically bad reports or inconsistent reports. And because information is scattered in the company, it's really hard to know who to contact and what data is where to answer what questions. So really unclear what's available and how to get insights out of it in a consistent manner over all the company. And what this leads is basically you can't have qualitative insights. And a result of that is also that because you don't have quote unquote quality data, of course, machine learning use cases and artificial intelligence use cases are completely out of scope, which is a shame if you have the candy shop company, just saying. Kind of want that. All right. Next up, I think, so we're going to go a bit more in explaining what data governance is, and then we'll see how this applies to this candy shop company. I'll give the floor to Charlotte, which will tell us everything about data governance. So,
Charlotte. All right. Yeah. Can you hear me well? All right. So we'll go in a bit more theoretical concepts right now. So first off, what is data governance? So what you see if you Google, for example, data governance in Google, you'll see that there's many definitions, often really bombastic definitions, a lot of different interpretations of data governance. Some key focus areas are on availability, usability, consistency, but also data integrity and security. And so other definitions are more focusing on complying with rules and regulations and not really about leveraging value out of data or information. So how do we, from data roots point of perspective, look at data governance? So what we say is that, or what we see is that the gold standard is still data management body of knowledge. So that has been around for a long time. What we often see as well is that data governance is often confused with data quality or data quality management, but also with metadata management or data security. These are often seen a bit as synonyms. And the reason why that is because if you tackle data governance in your organization, those are often the first points that you look at. But actually, data governance has as much to do with data architecture, data interoperability, data security, and so on. What we see is that organizations already have, or most organizations already have some rules in place for data quality management. They have some ownership in place over certain data sets, over data security, and who can access reports or data. But what we also see is that these processes are not set up thoroughly. So they are often an ad hoc process. When, for example, someone requests a report, the CEO wants to know what the numbers are of a marketing campaign, then they check the data quality. So it's often on an ad hoc basis. We say that data governance is not the same as just data quality management or data architecture. It's more the framework that sets the policies and procedures, the roles and responsibilities, really the standards around the data ecosystem, and also who maintains this. So you can have data quality checks within your company, but if you don't have the proper roles in place who check this data quality, who maintain this data quality, if you don't have the right policies in place on, for example, we check data quality on this and this KPI, we check it every time data is ingested in our data platform. If you don't have those policies in place, then you don't have proper data governance. So essentially, we say it's quite simple. And if we take an example, let's take data quality as an example, because this is often one of the first things being tackled. If we say it's about policies and standards, what we mean is that you set in place or you install some processes, some standards. For example, data quality should be checked on this and this and this dimension. Data quality is measured at every transformation that you do. Or data quality is checked whenever a new data set enters our data platform. So these are a bit of policies and standards. Also on roles and responsibilities, we need to know who is responsible, who is a proper data steward to check those data quality rules. This is just data quality. Of course, you have this for all of the different aspects. What happens when violations are in place? Who should report them? Who should they report it to? Is everyone's responsibility known as well? It should be communicated. So these are the aspects around roles and responsibilities. And then, of course, we also have the processes and the controls. For example, we install a platform or we install a dashboard where we check the data quality KPIs so that we can follow up and maintain this. For example, if a certain KPI or a threshold is reached, it should alert a trigger or an alarm to the person responsible for checking. So this is what we see this is how we as data roots see data governance. And last but not least, I forgot tools and technologies. Bear in mind that setting in place a tool or a technology for data governance in itself will not solve your data governance problem. You do need to have the roles around it. You do need to have the proper processes in place, the proper standards, and so on. So that is a bit of theory on how we see data governance. Of course, what is the benefit of data governance? This is probably something that you can also find when Googling. There's a lot of benefits. These are the 4 that we want to highlight. First of all, consistency. Nowadays, it is unfortunately the reality that a lot of different organizations have different definitions, even of same data sets, that 2 departments have a completely different definition of something. There's a different understanding of the data. Numbers are not updated or pushed through in all the systems, but only in a few, and so on. Next, we also have clarity. Clarity is mainly important because we see that more and more people are using data. There's a lot of operational teams that have access to data, that can draw their own conclusions, that can come up with their own insights. This is a bit of the trend of operational analytics or data democratization. We see that a lot of the end users are drawing their own conclusions and looking at the data. And so clarity is important because they need to be able to find data. They need to have the proper access. They need to know who to reach in case of questions. They need to know what the exact definitions are. So that is also an important aspect. Next up, of course, we have trust. Data governance helps to ensure that your data is usable, that it is accessible, that it is protected, that you can trust that the data that you get is actually qualitative data and is the data that represents the reality. So that's also an important aspect. And then, of course, we have compliance, because governance around the world are implementing legislations, and companies have to show how data is stored, especially how personal data is stored, how much access people have, how people can access their own data. They need to show how data is secured. So this really requires that you have the necessary policies in place. And especially within Europe, given GDPR rules and regulations, this is also an important aspect. So what we say is, bottom line, it all comes down to data governance improves your efficiency and effectiveness. So having proper data governance in place means that management can take decisions, doesn't take decisions on wrong or misinterpreted data. They can get faster and more reliable insights. You don't waste time looking for data or contacting a lot of people. And also data issues are resolved faster. Next up, we have a short view on the data governance stack. I'll let Gauthier do the introduction of this slide.
I'll do this one. I'll also quickly answer because I see we have a question from Akshay Perkar. Sorry if I mispronounce your name. What tools are available in Python for data quality and data profiling? So it's not really the purpose of this talk to really name tools, but on top of my head, quickly about these 2 topics, I think if you look a bit at open source today, Good Expectation is really the big contender there. They do offer data quality and data profiling that you can quickly plug into your systems. And they really integrate really well with the overall open source community, Airflow, basically everybody has operators to run Good Expectations projects. Yeah, right. Now to come back to the slide in itself, and I hope this gives a bit of an intro of basically what a tool can do for you, like how it can support you into your governance journey. So what you see on top, I think it's important, like it's called applications, but it's applications in the broad sense of the term, not just like technical applications, like some Are we back? Sound was on mute, but from where on? What did we miss?
I think from that slide on.
From that slide on. All right.
I'm sorry.
I'm going to start again. So quickly to answer the question. Oh, what is not voice? Sorry. Tools available for data profiling and data quality in Python.
That's covered.
Okay, that was covered.
Just
Thanks.
the slides.
Okay, so applications. So basically, like when I was talking about applications, I was talking about them in the broad sense of the term. So basically, like it's not really web applications; it's really what you want to do with it. Data quality is, of course, one big important aspect of data governance. Data identification, so being able to find, but also to know what's in there. Data consumption, so knowing, like giving access, but also tracking who uses what. I think it's extremely important. And there is a big part on policy enforcements because like you want to have good guidelines around data. In the context of GDPR, it even makes more sense because we're in Europe. Now, a bit from the bottom up. So if we look at tools, like if we look at data pipelines in general, which is what is on the bottom, like high level, and I'm not saying this is by far something that should represent your reality, but you will have something that basically like data migrates a bit from some raw or bronze layer into a gold layer, usually having some standardization in between. The idea there is you basically collect data, you put it in a format that you want, and then you do something really with it that everybody can consume. Now, if you look a bit at this and the kind of metadata that you can extract on top of it, there we make a distinction between four main types of metadata, and we separate them back into business and technical. So we make a distinction between basically stuff you can extract automatically from data pipelines, which is technical, but also data that is part of the business that is, well, for the most part, manual input. And I think this is also where you see like it's basically half-half, which means you can't do this without people. You can't do this without good process around it. It's impossible to make it work if you only focus on technical. So if you look a bit at technical, I think basically metrics on top of data. So here what I'm saying, like what we're trying to say is basically that you can track like what kind of data do you have, when was it ingested, like what's inside it. So you could, for example, say like this column as a mean of things like that. This will generally power your data quality. Provenance is extremely important. So there you have lineage, which is something very technical. So you can just say like this was produced using this data, but you also have a responsibility. So like data is linked to people or departments, or depending a bit on your situation. But it means that somebody needs to be assigned to it. And with these two elements, you can actually do, I mean, it's part of data quality, but it's also part of data identification. Data cataloging, so there we again have a technical aspect and a business aspect. So the technical aspect is basically like what's the format of this, where is it stored, what is the S3 path and whatnot. And the business part is around domain knowledge. So we all have tables with a lot of columns in it, and it doesn't always it's not always super clear what it represents in reality. And this is where the domain knowledge is extremely important. In the data catalog, like you usually have these two layers. If you look at the, like broadly speaking, like the different metadata hubs that are out there. By the way, there will be a session about this. Then domain knowledge inside your data catalog is extremely important, because different departments, for example, might talk about the same thing. It might be different columns, but actually same concept, right? So it enables everybody to speak the same language, and it maps basically back to technical data. So where is it stored and what does it look like? On top of it, and that's for policy enforcement and definitely for GDPR, like you need to know what is PII and what is not PII. And that's definitely business data. Like it's something that you need to do manually. Like you have tools out there to help you do it, but it's not 100%, right? So basically, like now, the idea is that you can a bit map tools around this. Like some tools might do part of it. Some tools try to cover the full spectrum. If you talk a bit about data quality and data profiling, we're definitely on the metrics part. So you can see like it's only one part of the solution. If you talk really purely about tooling, like it only cover one part of the data governance. Whereas what you try to do basically is to cover the whole metadata spectrum. I think that's it. I'm gonna give the floor to Charlotte back basically, so that she can explain a bit like a few misconceptions about data governance, and then we'll jump back into our candy shop to see how this nice theory applies.
Yep.
Charlotte.
All right. Can you hear me properly? Yeah. Okay. So indeed, some misconceptions of data governance. So this is what we see based on experience, based on how we go in different organizations and how people see data governance. Often it is seen as a big or a one-off Big Bang project, whereas it is actually a continuous process. It should be executed iteratively. It should be executed. You should really start from something small and then build it up gradually. But this is something that should be sustainable within your organization. What is often said is that data governance is hard to set up, but even harder to maintain. Secondly, we have a misconception that says data governance is an IT responsibility. Also, this is not the case. Data governance is really business driven because often it's the business that indicates that something is wrong with the data or that the numbers are not correct. And so they go back and forth to IT, to data platforms, to data teams to get it solved. So often it is business driven, but of course it should be supported by IT. The third misconception is that data governance is regulatory or compliance driven. And also data governance, number 4, data governance is metadata and data quality management. This is also not correct. No, what we say is that regulation, a lack of trust, a lack of data quality, of oversight and ownership, those are triggers to formalize data governance. So often, indeed, metadata and data quality are typically the first areas addressed by data governance. And why it is also confused with regulatory or compliance driven is because people often tend to install data governance practices because they need to comply with rules and regulations and security, whereas they should really install a data governance program when they want to extract more value from their data, when they want to make clear definitions of their data, when they want to know who is responsible for what exactly. So not just for compliance reasons. Number 5 is that what we see is that data governance is only for large organizations. So this is also a misconception. Of course, even small organizations can benefit from some form of data governance. Doesn't matter how big your company is, if your data quality is not right, if you don't know exactly what kind of data you have in the company, or if you don't know where it's stored exactly, then a small company even will also have issues on this. Number 6 is implementing data governance means implementing a tool. Also, that is a misconception, and that is a really important one. So Data governance, well, don't get me wrong, data governance does need a tool, especially now with the data platforms that are becoming increasingly complex. There's a lot of data, there's more and more data within organizations. So you need some kind of tool for automation, but you need to define the principles, the ownership, the rules first, and then a tool can help you in setting up your data governance process. It won't fix your data governance process, and it won't fix the issues that you currently have with data governance by just installing a tool. And then number seven, data quality needs to be fully centralized. That as well is a misconception. What we see is that often data governance is, for example, defined by higher management or by an IT, and then it is divided. It doesn't have to be the case anymore. It becomes impossible for one single department to keep track of all organization-wide data. So there's many forms of data governance structures that you can set up. You can say data governance rules need to be defined, centralized, but then the execution can be distributed among domains. Or you can still keep it centralized. That's also still an option. But there's many options, and you need to check for your organization what works best. If you have different data platforms, different systems, it might not make sense to really centralize data governance. It might make sense to have more data governance per domain within your organization. Voila, those are a bit the misconceptions of data governance. Are there any questions that came in the meantime?
Not so far.
No? Okay.
All right. Not so far. Thanks, Nico, for fixing the sound. But feel free to do so, though, if you do have questions. I mean, we'll gladly welcome them.
Yeah, we will.
There we go.
Voilà.
So again, from Ashke Perker, are data quality rules defined per data source?
But that's something that every organization has to make up for its own. Per data source, you can define data quality rules. Often, if you define, for example, dimensions of data quality, they can be applied on multiple data sets. If you say, for example, the data should be complete, you cannot have any empty fields, for example, then you can apply those for multiple data sets. As well with the formatting. But of course, it depends on what kind of data you have. If you have a lot of unstructured data, it's going to be difficult to really set rules for a general, all of your data. It might be that you then have to look at data quality rules per data set.
Yeah. And I would say in general, like start smaller. I mean, if you can do it already on, because some people will say, we want it on a row level and things like that. But I mean, if you don't have it on a data set level, for example, or if you don't have it even higher up, like it doesn't make a lot of sense. So.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. All right, so we'll continue then. So this is just some basic red flags. So if you see these things popping up within your organization, it might mean that you need data governance. For example, if you have siloed data. With siloed data, we don't mean necessarily data that you have in different domains or different departments within your organization, because nowadays in complex environments, you often have data in multiple departments. Siloed data means that one department does not know, for example, what kind of data is available for other teams or other domains. There's no communication. It's not clear exactly who does what with the data. So that's more what we mean with that. Next up, we have data quality issues impacting decisions. If the CEO doesn't know the numbers, or higher management needs to know the numbers, for example, to present on a board, and they cannot trust on the numbers that are delivered, that is also a big red flag. Next up, we have different stories from different people. That is something that we see often in an organization. We ask a data definition or a definition for some kind of data field to one person, we ask it to someone else or a specific data set, and they give a different story. So that is also important. And of course, the access, too many people with access, or you don't know exactly who has access, is also a red flag. And next up, we also have no view on who to consult when having data issues or data questions. So we know that data governance can often be seen as a burden. It can be seen as there will be more emails to be sent, there will be more conversations to be held, more meetings to organize and prepare, more responsibilities. But really, it comes to the benefit of every organization, because nowadays what we see is that a lot of organizations already govern their data. What we see is that there's often informal meetings to govern your data when issues are reported about data quality or about access or about definitions. So we see that this already happens within organizations, but these are often set up on an ad hoc basis and only when issues occur. So could be that, for example, your company already has a policy regarding customer information or PII data. Could be that you already have an onboarding document on new hires, on what data can you find where and who should you contact. These are all data governance principles that you already have in place. So it's really, when starting a data governance program or starting with data governance, it's very crucial that you already have a look at what you already have within the company, because often you will see that there's a lot more installed than what you originally think. And the fact that you don't know, for example, what is already going on for data governance in your company means that there's also lack of communication, and that these data governance aspects are not communicated well throughout the organization. So if we now go back to our candy shop, so what we have seen is that the candy shop has indeed, for example, done a first step in assessing their current governance within the company. They have checked what kind of data quality KPIs are currently being checked, who checks this, who has the responsibility, what kind of data do we have in each of the different domains, and so on. So it has been decided that some effort has been put in, first off, assessing what is currently there. They've also defined on what they would first tackle on a data governance strategy and approach. This seems like a very heavy word, data strategy or data governance strategy, whereas we've hammered a few times already on start small. So a data governance strategy can be, first we assess what is currently there, then we install some KPIs for data security, then we take on a next step. So it's really important to start small, to define some rules and policies around, for example, data discovery first, and then the next step. They have also set up the necessary roles. Per domain, for example, they defined a data owner who is responsible for what data is ingested in the data platform, how is the data transformed, how is it consumed, and who consumes it as well, to which other departments does the data go to or flow to. So that has been set up. And also they've selected one or more tools. I'll leave it in the middle. They selected one of more tools to follow up on data quality or data discovery. They've created, for example, a data dictionary with a certain tool. And also they selected some tools because they need to be able to maintain what they have put in place. So this is just a very general example, not saying that each company should do it this way, but this is very general.
We have a small question in between.
Oh, sure.
So we have a question from Tim. So for the responsibility part, is it simply assign a responsibility to someone intuitively to create clarity, or is there basically a right way methodology to assign responsibility? Who, why?
Yeah. But it does make sense to have responsibility for someone that is close to the data. If the person is not working with the data on a day-to-day basis, then it doesn't really make sense to make that person a data owner. And also the person should, of course, be motivated to do so. So I wouldn't say you just appoint someone, but you do have to involve multiple people to discuss who can be, for example, a data owner. also the people that you think that might be good for it. But I would assume that it is someone that is responsible, for example, for setting up data pipelines, do data engineering, that they, for example, also check data quality of the data that is being ingested. You can say that, for example, people that work with the data on a day-to-day basis to create insights, that someone of those people becomes a data owner to see how the data is transformed, what happens with the data, how is it consumed, who consumes it, and so on.
Thanks. All right.
All right. Cool. All right. So let's continue. So this is what is on this slide here. This is still very general, right? If we would ever do a project for this so-called candy shop company, it would be more specific, of course. You need to define what kind of steps you will take, who will take what steps exactly. For tools as well, we will not say exactly what kind of tools you need right now. This is very generic. But for example, how is our problem one solved with this or with data governance?
Before we jump on that one, because it's just like we had an extra question coming in, but maybe I can also answer that one. Like, how should we come up with the data quality score, and which factor do we calculate the score? I do think like you need KPIs on your data, but basically like this is a bit up to your company. Generally speaking, like you have a few dimensions that you look when you look at, for example, specifically data quality. Like I think there is like 6 of them on top of my head. You basically look a bit at timeliness, whether it's complete or not, whether does it represent reality or not. And then up to you to come with a good metric on what is important for your company. Like it should be a good proxy to, are we doing good data quality or not? But that's really specific to each and everyone. Some company care more about having stuff on the right time. Some company care more about having everything right the first time. So it's a really difficult question to answer just like that.
Yeah.
Please keep going, Charlotte.
Okay. Okay, so problem one. So remember that we started off with the CEO or someone of higher management that wanted to know what the impact was of a certain marketing campaign. So with data governance, and you have the proper roles and responsibilities defined, it is actually clear for the business who they need to reach out to. Might be that they still have to reach out to a few people. It might be that they don't know if they need to reach out to the analytics team or sales or finance, but at least per domain, there is someone that can take up this question. And there are clear rules between the different domains, so that you don't see this ping pong anymore between the different domains. But for example, analytics team can say, this is something that we take up because we have this and this and this data available. We get the raw data and we get exactly these and these reports from finance and sales, or we get that data from finance and sales, so we can draw the end conclusion for you. Next up, we had problem 2, where the data team had no view on source data because there was raw data coming in. There was also data coming in from finance and sales. So now it is clear for the analytics team what data exactly comes in, what data do they already have available. So they know the different data sources. It is clear who owns and maintains this data. And it's also clear if they still have questions on finance and sales data, who they need to reach out to in those domains. So it means that different data owners are held responsible or accountable for their data and their products in each of the different domains, and also for facilitating the communication between these distributed domains. And so once the data is ingested, is transformed by a certain domain, the domain data owners can leverage that data for the operational and analytic needs. And so that is solved with data governance as well. Problem 3, we had the data team delivering wrong information. First off, the data team did not know if a report like that has already been built before, because it was not properly maintained. They didn't know where to search for such a report. Secondly, also they had wrong definitions. They were using different definitions than, for example, the sales team who had previously delivered a report to the business or to the CEO or higher management. So now this has also been cleared out. And yeah, well, unfortunately, it is still the reality that a lot of organizations have different definitions. One of the things that could solve this is having a data catalog in place. For example, using a tool that offers such a technologies or that offers such concepts, but still have the rules and the processes in place around it. I've read an article recently about it refers to data observability. And basically what it says is that a lot of teams tackle data discovery and data definitions, data quality on an ad hoc basis, rather than doing it on a holistic approach or a well thought approach. And the article said that, well, you have in the same way that you have MLOps and in the same way that you have DevOps that apply observability and maintainability to the software, to the implementations, to the models that you create, you should also have the same observability for your data discovery and quality, for your security as well, so that data teams are able to monitor and find root causes, fix and prevent data issues in real time. It's a really good article. It was by Louise de Leiritz. And she really advocates for data observability in the same way that you, for example, do DevOps or MLOps, so that you can understand what the data is in your system, so that you know what quality data you have, and so on. And then we have problem 4. It says that reports are not well maintained. So what we have seen is that in a few months' time, there was again a marketing campaign. However, to take conclusions from the same report that has been built up the first time, we see that, or we saw that the data, for example, in the finance department or in the sales department had changed, and the people from the analytics team were not informed about that. So the report now contains data that is totally outdated, for example. So again, this is about the ownership over reports, making sure that someone is responsible to keep it maintained, making sure that someone knows where all of the reports are kept, what is available, what is outdated, what needs to be updated, and so on. So again, data leadership by domain on all aspects concerning data. Yeah, so what we have tackled in our company, our data shop or candy shop company, is a short list of problems that can occur when you have data governance issues. Here we kind of have like a long list. Even this is not a long list. This is, for example, what happens when you have data governance problems. Also some red flags again. So when you have data quality issues, data overload and dumps, for example, there's a lack in trust. There's a lack in documentation even. There is no budget or sponsorship for these kinds of aspects. You don't really see the value from data. People think IT owns the data. So these are just some kind of or a list of data governance problems, but there are many more, of course. And then we can finish it off with some final thoughts. Just a recap of what we just have discussed. It's more about people. That's how we see it. Data governance is more about people than it is about a tool or that it is about data. Process and documents are essential. It is essential that everyone knows what is expected, that everyone knows what kind of roles and responsibilities are assigned. We say also that software and tools are needed, especially nowadays in complex environments, but they won't fix a broken process in data governance. They won't set up the data governance around all of these aspects that we just discussed by just installing some tools. Also, what we see is that starting data governance is hard, maintaining it is even harder. Unless data governance should not be equally applied to all data sets and domains. It's not because you have multiple domains that you need to apply every aspect of data governance to each domain. You really need to check for your own organization, for your own domains, what kind of data do you have, what kind of governance needs to be in place. So voila, these are the final thoughts to end this session with.
Before we finish this session, any extra questions that we might get on the chat? I'm just asking. Okay, nothing coming up. So thanks a lot, Charlotte. Am I muted? It's normal. I'm muted on my computer. So thanks a lot, Charlotte, for all the explanations. I think we invite everybody to the next Data Roots Research meetup, which will be about metadata hubs. So let's say much more concrete in terms of tooling. So we invite you really to follow that. Like, I think the idea there is that we go a bit over the different architectures, the different metadata hubs that are currently available. As Data Roots, we do have a bit of a focus on open source, but that's just how we do stuff. So make sure to follow that one. It's going to be really interesting and maybe a bit more tool-oriented, for which we did have questions today. So that's it.
Thanks, guys, for listening.
Thanks a lot, and see you soon.
Yep, bye.
Bye.